So a couple weeks ago, we did just like, hey, music is sound, and remember to just listen to like how amazing it is. And then last week, some different ways to listen to music, different things you can kind of engage in as you go to keep us kind of focused and paying attention. So I thought if I'm doing my job, I should probably at least have one week where we're doing some actual content listening, like good jazz students would be. But I recognize that we're at different levels. And in general, I think, a lot of us are just getting into jazz, or we're mostly listeners rather than musicians, as Deborah said last time. I thought this week I would go over what I think is the most important thing to listen to beyond just digging the music, like beyond just like emotionally and attentionally and spiritually kind of connecting to the music. I think the next most important thing, if you want to actually get into the content of what people are playing, the next most important thing to listen to is form, if we're talking about jazz music. And form is the structure upon which we play. And jazz music's actually relatively simple compared, I just mentioned late romantic symphonies, which are the opposite in terms of studying form. Maybe not the opposite. You go into 20th century music and things get even harder. But when we're talking about symphonies, they have these very large scale forms where, each section is like a big old A section, a big old B section, various things, and then a big old development. And part of the growth of that tradition was almost obscuring those things or making them kind of elide more with each other. Jazz musicians would take a much more simpler approach. Part of it is because we're improvisers, so we need a form that we can kind of handle to play on. And we need something at least that keeps us all kind of corralled in the same place, which is not to say there aren't through composed things. But most of what we play is, the technical term would be strophic music, strophic. We play strophic music. And what strophic music is when you have some short form, relatively speaking, that repeats itself over and over and over again, like a theme and variations would be like another version of a strophic form. The blues is a very simple strophic form, often 12 bars, and we repeat those 12 bars over and over again. We play melody on it in the beginning, and then we move into improvisation after that. And in order to really learn to listen and understand what's going on in jazz on a more content level, meaning starting to understand the underlying melodies and harmonies, rhythms, the interaction between the musicians, things like that, you have to have an awareness of the form. Or if you have I should put it another way, if you have an awareness of the form, it's going to be much easier because you know where everybody is on the playing field, if you will. You know whether they're at the 10-yard line or at the 50-yard line. You know whether they're in the crease or they're, at the blue line. I'm trying to think of other sports things. You know which base they're on in the world's most complicated sport, which is baseball. So you kind of have a sense of where the musicians are, so it's much easier to track what's going on. And this is true whether you're one of the musicians playing or whether you're a listener. So being able to identify form and being able to kind of track what's going on will make your listening experience a lot more, you'll have a lot more clarity on what's going on, for sure. It's to me, it's the first thing you should be listening for as a maybe jazz student who wants to get something more than just the sheer joy of listening, which if that's all you ever want to do, that's totally fine too. So next to the blues, the most common forms we use in jazz are 32 bar forms, meaning they're 32 measures long and they repeat. And by far, the most common of the 32 bar forms that we use is called AABA, which means you have an 8-bar section, then you repeat that 8-bar section again. So we have an A section, then we play that again as another A section. Then there's a B section, which we call a bridge. And in this case, it really is a bridge because it's going to connect us back to one more A section. So A, B, A. And so what I'd like to do tonight is play you some examples of AABA tunes, recordings. And I'm going to try to give you kind of some heads up of things to listen for. In my younger days, I would have come up with like all these tunes with all these different forms and been like, now figure out what this form is. Now figure out what this form is. an older, wiser teacher I now am, and realize like it'd be better for you to just learn what AABA is tonight. And once you understand that, then it'll be a lot easier to maybe start listening for other forms. Oh, well, that didn't go that way. Maybe it does something different. Because like ABAC is a very common jazz form, for instance. Just general AA, where the second A is slightly different, is more common than you'd think. But tonight we're going to every tune tonight is AABA. So you'll get to hear that form lots of different ways. If you have no interest in this whole form thing and you're just like, oh, I don't want to go to jazz school, I just want to dig some cool music, these are also all great. And I'll tell you a little bit about the different musicians involved. If you just want to sit back and dig some cool music, you can do that too. I'm going to start with, after doing a little bit of research, which means just getting to listen to a whole bunch of tracks in iTunes, I found what I think is maybe the clearest example of AABA on a recording that I have. This first track is from an album, I think it's from 92. Thank you, John. It's from 92 or 93. And it's an album with 2 guitars. Oh, my other challenge, which I just set up for myself for this, is there's no saxophones or trumpets tonight. So I'm sorry, Charlotte, if you play saxophone or trumpet. You don't get to hear saxophone or trumpet tonight. I'm sorry. I play the saxophone, and so, you know, I'm going to be biased towards that. But I also play the piano poorly, and I also play the drums poorly. So I like those instruments a great deal. And even though I don't play the guitar, I like the guitar. So his first track, so every track tonight is rhythm section only. This first one is from an album that John Scofield and Pat Metheny did together, 2 great guitar players. It's called I Can See Your House From Here. And it features the great Steve Swallow on electric bass. Paul Romain, I picked a track that has the Leisure bass on it, the electric bass. You'll be happy to know. And the great Bill Stewart on drums. And I like to tell stories with these things. And since Paul's here, he was there too. I usually come back to definitely one of my top 2 or 3 greatest musical concerts I've ever heard in my life. Probably the first one is actually the Kronos Quartet playing the Ben Jonson arrangement of Amazing Grace, which is a string quartet. It was life-changing for me. But right next to it is at the Telluride Jazz Festival in the mid-2000s. I don't remember. My children were still very little. The John Scofield Trio was playing. We were there playing with the Ken Walker Sextet. And it was the trio with Steve Swallow playing bass and Bill Stewart playing drums. And I just remember listening to it, and about halfway through the first song, I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. And I got so excited, I did the cliche thing, which I'd never done before. I actually called my drummer friend, Shiloh Stroman, so I could hold up the phone so he could hear the music. And he wasn't home. And so instead I just left him this voicemail like, you gotta listen to this, which I'm sure sounded like hot garbage through my phone. But it was amazing. And we were able to go and stand behind Bill Stewart and watch him play. And it was just unbelievable. And I'll tell you why. It was because the time felt so good that you could feel your body healing while you listened to it. It was so electrifying. So now I'm really talking this track up, and it better just change your life. So this track maybe won't change your life. But this is super clear AABA form. There's a little intro you're going to hear. Actually, no, I take that back. I'm thinking of another track. There's no intro. It's going to go right into the A section. So you're going to hear 2 A sections. You'll hear a very clear shift to the bridge, and then a very clear shift back to the last A section. And then there is a little interlude they play before the first solo, and they'll play that interlude before each solo. I'll try to, I'm going to try not to interrupt the music, but I'll try to kind of holler things if I think you should notice them. But it's pretty clear here. And this is a track called The Red One, which is named for Pat Metheny's guitar synthesizer, which you'll hear on this track. He's the second soloist. So this is The Red One. All right, and that ending is called a tag ending, which it wasn't the topic for tonight, but that was, jazz musicians sometimes, we only got about 3 ways we end tunes, and that's one of them, unless someone writes something out. But so that's like, you just take the last little part of the tune and you repeat it a couple times, and that's called a tag ending, and it's usually 2 or 3 times. And yeah, so I want to know, Was that fairly clear on the AABA form for that one? Okay, I'm getting nodding heads. I like that.
Indeed.
Yes, Paul Romain says yes. I think, I mean, I could have like dug some more and tried to find some things, but as soon as I heard that, I was like, I think that's the example I'll use for the rest of my life when I teach jazz of AABA form, because it's just so clear when they go to the bridge, because there's a complete change in not just chord but also texture. Like everybody in the band does something different, and then they go back at the other thing. So, and that, I want to point that out because one thing you can listen for once you know form when you go hear jazz musicians play. They aren't all going to do this. It varies from band to band, but often the rhythm section will show where the bridge is. And they won't just show it by following along with the chords, but they'll change, they'll often play a rhythm that leads nicely into the bridge. The drummer might change what cymbals they use on the bridge and then shift back to the other cymbal when they go the A section. The pianist might change the rhythms they use to comp in the A section. So this form and the idea of following the form will helps the musicians not only from a standpoint of just knowing where they are, say, in the harmony or how many bars have gone by, but it also helps them orchestrate just how they play. You'll also notice if you start listening, even to those solos we just heard, how the soloists play guitar. They're telling a story through that form. So how much energy they use or how dense their rhythms are, or what the shapes of the melodies are going to be informed by where they are in the form, because that's kind of, they know like, okay, if I'm going to play 2 times through that form, this is kind of how I'm pacing this energetically. All right. If anyone has any questions or comments, just holler. Don't be shy. But I'm going to go on to the next example because, of course, I have too many examples. We may not listen all the way through to all these, but I wanted to listen at least all the way through to that one to make sure we were kind of establishing some ground rules. Oh, next is another good one. My favorite thing about this class is I get to go, oh, yeah, this is good too. I forgot. This is a really good one. So this next one is from one of my favorite albums. I think I say that about virtually every single one of these, but this is from a Benny Green album. Benny Green, the pianist, who's a great, amazing jazz pianist. This is from an album called These Are Soulful Days. And it's a great album because there's no drums on this particular album. It's just piano, the great Christian McBride on bass, and the great Russell Malone on guitar. And I like to show this album to the students, this one and another one, the Oscar Peterson Trio with Stan Getz. But that has a saxophone player, so I didn't pick that one. Because they're great examples of beautiful time feel without drummers. I like drummers, but that it just shows we aren't relying on the drummers for great time. We can play great time, even just in the rhythm section without them. So this is the title track. This is called "These Are Soulful Days," and again, we'll probably just listen through maybe the melody and a chorus or two. But this is another one of those. I mentioned this the first week. This is another one of the albums I put on when I want to mess with things in the stereo or I want to check out a particular pair of headphones, because it's recorded so well and you can really hear the articulation clarity on the bass and the guitar and the piano. Beautiful album. So These Are Soulful Days. You'll hear this starts right at the top of the form. So you'll hear they're starting right at the top of an A section. This melody is pretty clear because the guitar player and the piano player will double things through the A sections. And then you'll hear the pianist play the melody by himself through the B section or the bridge, and then the guitar will come back in for the last A section. And then I think the piano solos first. So how about the clarity on that one? Were you able to follow along okay with the form there?
Yeah, man.
I'm kind of pacing these up in terms of difficulty of following the form, because the first one is they just do the same thing the whole track and it's awesome. This one, it's kind of set up so clearly and these guys play so clearly. Man, Benny Green sounds so great. Life goals, right?
He's a swinging cat.
Oh man, he sounds so good. My Benny Green story is I was in Portland, Oregon with Art Landy doing our little duo tour, and we went to go hear Nancy King sing, and we were just standing there listening. We got to the very end of the gig, and all of a sudden this cat comes up and starts talking to Art, and Art's like, oh, hey, Peter, this is Benny Green. And I mean, this is like, I'm like in like 30 years old and I just turn into like a child. I'm like, oh my God, Mr. Green, your album Testifying. I've listened to it so many times and I just, it's like changed my life forever. And he just said, man, thank you so much. And he just gave me this huge hug and he just held me for a long time. And then he kind of let go. And then Landy said, Benny, I don't know what you're on, but you should just keep taking it. You seem really happy. And I just laughed. I thought that was the funniest thing ever. But he's a very sweet person and a great musician. He's got lots of his albums are great. I just kind of tried to pick one that was a little different. And I just liked that album a lot. I like the way it sounds.
That's an awesome album for my drummers.
Yeah.
You know, like I've just been collecting like those kind of albums, like drummerless stuff, like the Christian McBride, like the one with Nicholas Payton, all the Herbie tunes. And
I don't know that one.
Yeah,
I know the Parker's Mood one with Roy Hargrove.
Oh, that's a good, yeah. Like I'm just starting to, you know, and then of course the old ones like the Bill Evans and the Intuition album with Eddie Gomez.
Oh yeah, sure. I forgot about that.
Anyway, carry on.
All right, very good. Okay. Okay, so we're all good so far. We're all clear. You're all passing your quizzes. All right, good. Okay, here's another one. Now, has everyone here seen Young Frankenstein? Do you know this Mel Brooks movie, Young Frankenstein? This is a classic of comedic film. There's a great scene where Gene Wilder character, Dr. Frankenstein, obviously, is introducing. Yes, that's right, Frankenstein is introducing the creature to the audience. And I don't know if you remember this, but they have top hats and canes and jackets, and they sing "Puttin' on the Ritz." And it is a classic scene from American comedy for all time. And you should go see it if you've never seen it. So I just bring that up because this next track is Puttin' on the Ritz, I should say. This is the Larry Goldings Trio. So this is Larry Goldings on organ, the great Peter Bernstein on guitar, and again, the great Bill Stewart on drums. I guess I did have a repeat. Didn't realize that. But so I picked this one because if you know that tune, you'll be able to follow along through the melody. And then when they get into the solos, again, we're moving into kind of more like a walking fluid jazz. So it's easy to start going, oh, I'm kind of lost in all this. But if you can keep that tune going in your head while you're listening, keeping time and all that, you'll be able to follow along. Also, you'll notice things like when they get to the bridge, the rhythm section might do something different. When they get to the top of the form, they might do something different. So here comes Puttin' on the Ritz. And could you hear how Bill Stewart played a big fill into the top of the form at the end of Larry Golding's solo on the organ, so that there was still energy going across when Peter Bernstein started his solo. And he did that in coordination with the form, in fact, exactly the top of the form. So this is, so we're tracking this all the time when we're playing as jazz musicians. You know, sometimes I've heard people say, you just got to let go and you don't think at all when you play. And I'm like, well, that's definitely not true. I'm not literally thinking about every note coming out of my saxophone, because that would be impossible and I would get behind and think the time would feel bad and all these kind of things. But I always know what the form is all the time. I'm definitely thinking like, here comes the end of the form. I should probably stop my solo before I start playing worse. You know, or I've been going for a while. It's time to let someone else play. Or I'm about done, but it's only the bridge, so I'm going to have to finish out this chorus. You know, things like that. Or a little less self-loathing and more serious. You know, the bass player is finishing up their solo. We only have 8 bars left. What are we going to do? Are we going to go into trading with the drums? Are we going to play the head out? Meaning, even when I'm not the one soloing, I still have to keep track of the form because I need to know when to come back in. So this understanding of the form and listening for the form is pretty baseline thing to get control over as a jazz musician. I see furious gesturing in the Topping household. Are there questions, comments, or anything?
It's me.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I just if I can help, or if there's anything I'm unclear about, just.
He's keeping the time. That's
okay.
That's what he, that's the gesturing. But
Okay.
so when you go back to, so what's the head when they go
Okay.
like this, and you go back to the head? Is that going back to the A bar? Is that,
Yeah.
is that
So when jazz musicians say go to the head, they mean go to the melody out, or they go to the melody. But usually we do that when we say that when we're going to play the melody that's at the end of the tune, because jazz, it's great, but it has some predictable things about it. There may or may not be an intro. We play the in head, which is the melody, in like when you're blue and you don't know where to go to. Why don't you go where, and we play through that whole thing. We call that the head or the melody, the tune, Right. Then we play a whole bunch of solos on that same form. Sometimes the bass player solos, sometimes they don't. Sometimes we trade with the drums or the drums solo, sometimes they don't. And then we go back to the head and we have this really fancy, very secret gesture where we literally point at our heads. And then we do this sometimes, yeah. Or I had a teacher who always did this, which sometimes means just go on, but usually means go out, take it out. And then we play the melody out, and then there may or may not be a coda or an ending or something like that. We don't always do that, but 90-some% of the time we do that, especially if it's this kind of capital J jazz kind of mainstream world. So the head is the melody.
The head is a melody.
Yeah. Okay. And it's still often in jazz, not always, but often it's played on the same form as the form we're following the whole time. The melody in combination with the chords and its structure is the form we're going to use over and over again to solo on. Again, not always, but way the majority of the time.
That's where I'm not totally following.
So the head is usually one time through the whole form.
That is correct.
2 bars is the head. It's not just the A section. It's A, B, and A. So all 32 bars, and usually at the end played one time.
Yes.
Again, usually.
Okay.
I
got hooked.
And some of that depends on the length of the tune. So a shorter form, like a blues, will usually play the melody twice because it goes by quickly. And then a longer form, like a 32-bar form, like Puttin on the Ritz, we're probably just going to play that one time because it lasts a little longer.
Oh, this helps.
And sometimes,
and so like the bridge of Puttin on the Ritz is the Gary Cooper part. I don't remember all the lyrics, but Gary Cooper and or whatever Peter Boyle says in Young Frankenstein.
And sometimes one time through the form is called a chorus.
Yes, and we usually do call it that. Yeah. So when someone says, how many choruses do you want to take? And that's confusing because in popular music, a chorus is a different thing. Yeah. And of course, it's also the name of a ensemble is a chorus, but singers. But in jazz, when we say a chorus, that's one time through the form.
Okay. Great.
So if I take 2 choruses, that means I'm going all the way through the form of Puttin on the Ritz twice. AABA, AABA. Yeah. These are good questions because I think this is one of those things that if people who were not jazz musicians were able to identify when they listened, they would have a much greater appreciation. And I don't mean that you can't appreciate it just as oral sonic art form, which is amazing, but you would be able to notice things you didn't notice before, because you'd be able to notice when jazz musicians do things usually relates to where they are in the form, especially in the rhythm section. And sometimes it can be tricky if all you listen to is like big band music, because they're often doing the same thing, but they'll shift from solis to shout choruses to intro, so you get all this kind of potpourri of stuff that sometimes masks the form a little bit, which is very different than often small group jazz where we're just going to go boom, 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 and just hit that over and over again. We need the form to be relatively simple because we're making our stuff up as we go. So we need some kind of clear structure in order to be able to express ourselves without having to think so hard about the tune. Or at least that's how I feel about it. I like to play tunes I know. I'll just be honest. Like I love, I sound better on tunes I know. I know this is really illogical and shocking, but I sound better on things I know. And so I like playing those things because it's easier to play with other people and interact. So I like doing that because I got into music to have fun. I mean, clearly not for the money. So, anyway.
I would add that, like, for jam sessions, it's really important that people who've never played before have a structure they can play together.
Of course, yes, absolutely. And we can learn how to use the structure to be more interesting, or I shouldn't say more interesting, but maybe to get out of some of our ruts. Like, you know, like Paul Romain's usually encouraging us in Ken Walker Sectet, you know, come up with backgrounds. Or, you know, we don't always have to start with the melody. Like, you could start with someone soloing. There's plenty of recordings, classic jazz recordings, where it might be a blues and it starts with like the piano player playing a blues solo out front, and then you go to the melody, so that you can get away from the constant structure of now we play the head. There's a great line in I can't remember. I think it's David Berkman's book where he says, you know, his least favorite part of jazz is when the melody is drug out for its ritual beating after everyone has soloed. And I just love that visualization of like, well, we all got to play our solos, and now we gotta end this. So I guess we'll play the head out. We'll drag it out here and beat Donnelly to death, you know, and then we go on. So
that sounds like Dave, man.
Yeah,
that's really good.
So we don't have to do that. We don't have to just like be mindless and be like, well, we'll just okay, get the thing done and then do the other thing and then we're done. We don't have to do that. But by having the form be relatively simple, it allows us a lot of freedom to do things. And it also allows us to build up language so that we can interact. Meaning there's certain oral cues that I know, even if I don't know literally what they are and can't sit at the drum set and play them, but I've listened to enough jazz to know, like, if things are weird, I can listen to the drums and they're going to show me where the next section of the form is, or they're going to show me where the top is, or the way the pianist comps. That's going to help show me things. So the form is a very important thing, but it's also very useful. Like it helps make our lives easier once we understand it and can follow it. And sorry if I'm breaking up. It says my connection's a little unstable. I don't know what that is. And in fact, that's one of the most useful things young jazz musicians can do, is just get to the point where they can feel 8 bars in their sleep. I mean, I can hold a whole conversation and still be keeping track of where I am in the form on a tune. Hopefully I'm not doing that, but I could do it, you know. As John Riley once said, like, you should be able to do your taxes while you're playing your whatever you're trying to play. That's how well you should know what you're doing. And I kind of understand what he means. It's a little crass way of putting it, but let's listen to something else. I'm trying to see. I know I don't have tons of time left. We usually run over, so I don't want to keep everybody all night, but I got so many good things here. But I love the questions, and please just keep asking them. I'm going to give you just a little bit of one. This is a Wes Montgomery recording, "Smokin' at the Half Notes." This is a famous recording, Wes Montgomery. This is Wynton Kelly and on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, and the great Jimmy Cobb, who recently passed away, on drums. And we're going to listen to a tune. I think Paul can correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is a Sam Jones tune. This is called Unit 7. Is that right, Paul? Yeah, okay, he's saying yes. So I picked this one, and again, we'll probably just listen through the melody and a little bit of solo. I picked this one to show that AABA tunes are not always 8 bars, 8 bars, 8 bars, 8 bars. And I picked this one because I think it'll be pretty clear. This is a very common form in jazz. I shouldn't say very common, but there's more than one tune written like this. This is called a blues with a bridge. So in this case, the A sections are going to be blues choruses. So you're going to have a 12-bar blues chorus, another 12-bar blues chorus. You're going to have, in this case, an 8-bar long bridge, and then one more 12-bar blues chorus. So it's still AABA. It's just this time our A sections are 12 bars long, and they're a particular form that we all know, a blues form. So let me play this for you. They start right on it. You'll hear just right on the top of the first A section, which is a blues. And in the head, or in the melody, it's very easy to hear when they go to the bridge because the feel changes to a Latin feel there. So you'll notice that, and then you'll hear them go back to the last blues. So yeah, so was that fairly clear? Now that we didn't have the microwave going? Yeah, that's a good one. And another famous blues with a bridge you can go check out is a tune called Locomotion, which is on a famous album by John Coltrane called Blue Train. It's the 3rd track on Blue Train. And it's another blues with a bridge. And that's maybe an easier way to start listening for AABA than a lot of things, just because we usually get so inundated with the blues, we can hear that without a lot of extra effort. So that might be another good way to look at it. Also, people tend to, again, the rhythm sections tend to play in a certain way on that blues form that makes it usually pretty clear. What do folks wish? I know we're getting close to the end of time here. I have one more kind of track if you want your final exam for the day to listen to, or if you have other questions or comments or anything like that, I'm welcome to hear that.
I noticed that the rhythm section was the same one for Miles Davis's Kind of Blue album.
That's right. At least for Freddie the Freeloader. Right? Because Wynton Kelly plays piano on Freddie the Freeloader. Bill Evans actually plays piano on the rest of that album, but Wynton Kelly actually probably played more with that group than Bill Evans did, because Bill Evans was only in that group for a very short time, but Wynton Kelly actually toured a lot with Miles and Coltrane when Coltrane was in the band. In fact, I think that was the band right up until when Coltrane left the band, more or less. And that trio recorded a fair amount, actually, and both with Wes Montgomery and without Wes Montgomery. Sometimes it was Philly Joe Jones on drums instead of Jimmy Cobb, but they played a lot. And I love Wynton Kelly. He's like one of my favorite musicians of all time. I listen every Kelly at Midnight. You should go, if you like Wynton Kelly, go check out this album called Kelly at Midnight, or Kelly Blue is actually really good too. Those are two excellent Wynton Kelly for of his albums. He's on a bunch of other people's albums. He's on Hank Mobley's Soul Station, which is a candidate for my favorite album of all time, probably my favorite Blue Note album of all time. So we're going off the deep end now with talking about albums. But, okay, do you want? Okay, I'll give you a little bit of this one and then we'll call it a night. So this is I wanted to find one thing that was not like trying to be tricky, but that would just definitely require a little more attention. And so this is the Brad Mehldau Trio from 2000, really early 2000s. So this is Brad Mehldau Trio with Larry Grenadier and Jorge Rossi. Jorge Rossi on the drums and Larry Grenadier on the bass. And this is an old show tune called Anything Goes, which is an AABA tune. And they're going to play it in 5. And they're also going to play it with kind of a different groove, or whatever you want to call it, rhythmic pattern, certainly than the original tune was played in. But like all Brad Mehldau recordings, he is super melodic and very clear with what he's doing with melody. And so even though there's a lot of density here, you can still generally follow what's going on. So I think it's a good one if you want to stretch your ears a little bit and track the AABA form, even while it's a little more squirrely than some of the other stuff we've checked out. It's also a little squirrely because after the melody, they go right into a bass solo, which, when you're playing a tune in 5, you kind of don't necessarily want to give the bass player a solo, but we're going to just jump right in and do it anyway. And Jorge Rossi is a little squirrely on the drums. But anyway, I want to play a little bit of it anyway, also because it's just awesome and they sound great. So anyway, here we go. And I like this tune because it's at the beginning of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which I secretly like that one the best of the Indiana Jones movies, which puts me way in the minority. But it's a pretty awesome track. And Brad Mehldau is still amazing to me. I've seen him, 3-4 times live, and it's still just like magic to me. I don't really understand it. Like everyone else I've heard, I'm like, I can kind of see what you're doing, and if I practice for 10,000 hours, I could get maybe not artistically, but at least technically. But every time I hear Brad Mehldau, I'm like, what? He's like an alien. He's like Art Tatum, but calmer. But I remember, speaking of form, so I remember seeing that same trio play in Boulder many years ago, probably before that album came out. And they were playing Alone Together, which is a great standard with kind of, it is sort of an AABA tune, but it's kind of a weird AABA tune where the last A is shorter than the first 2 A's. But they were playing it in 7 and they were playing really fast. And it just sounded like they were all just improvising all the time. And I remember the young me thinking at some point, these guys don't know where they are. Like they're totally BSing us. Like it's just so complicated and they're just all over the place. And you know what? Like within 5 seconds after I thought that, they just went bam, and they all came in right at the top of the form together and started playing the tune, the melody. And I was like, oh, they did know. They in fact did know where they were. It turns out they're really good jazz musicians that get paid to do this, and they tour around and they make albums and stuff. So it was a humbling moment for my ego and my brain. But yeah, but once again, no matter, even though Brad Mehldau was like magic and that trio was amazing, they're still tracking the form the whole time. So once again, getting back to this idea of like, this is the thing we're all hanging our kind of time on, if you will, like not the time necessarily of the groove, but our literal temporal space we're dealing with on stage, and where we do things and when we decide to do them and why we decide to do them. This idea of form is super key to that. So I'm hoping tonight, after some of those examples, at least AABA starts to become a form you can recognize. And yeah, I'll tell you, like a lot of things in life, once you get to the point where you could say, really identify the blues form, really identify AABA form, then a lot of the other forms will start to come quicker and quicker and quicker. Because once you really get how one of them works, you realize, oh, they all kind of work the same. It's just you got to learn how to be patient and wait. Oh, okay, well, that didn't do AABA, but let me just wait here a second. It'll probably show me something else it's going to do instead. But thank you all. Hopefully see you soon.